Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry for those that didn't know that last Monday night there was no class, but we sent out an email and I wasn't in town the week before to notify everybody. But by the way, Mitzvah Shem, next week, Monday and Wednesday, because of Hanukkah, there's also no class. People have to spend time with their family. So tonight there's a class, and then Monday, December 6th, which is the 8th day of Hanukkah, but that night Hanukkah is over, so there'll be a class in 10 days, the following Monday. Anyway, tonight's class is sponsored anonymously by somebody who wants to thank Hashem for all the good things he did for them. They became healthy. And also I want to make tonight's make tonight's class dedicated to the memory of Rabbi Shimon Alevi, who passed away today, which is a very big loss for all of us. So I'd like to dedicate tonight's class in his memory, in addition to one sponsoring the class as a thanksgiving to Hashem for all the things he did for him. So last time we were learning halacha, we were learning the laws of Berchas Hananin, the Bracha Rishena, the laws of making the bracha before eating. We learned that the heavens belong to Hashem, the earth belongs to people. If you eat without a bracha, the Gemara says, like stealing from Hashem, you're misusing holy objects. But once you make a bracha, it becomes yours. So a person has to learn the laws of brachas. You just can't make a shahako because I don't know what the bracha is. A person needs to learn what the brachas are and make the appropriate bracha. Last thing we were learning was when you make a bracha, you have to hold the object in your right hand. Or if you're a left-handed person, you hold the object in the left hand. Now, if somebody didn't hold the object in his hand, but it was right in front of him, they do not have to make another bracha. But let's say somebody wanted, and this is where we're up to now. What happens if somebody wanted to eat an apple? He makes a very eats, and then he goes into the refrigerator to get the apple. Because the food was not in front of him when he made the bracha is invalid. He has to make another bracha. Ideally, you have to hold the food in your hand, the right hand, or if you're lefty, left hand, at the time you make a bracha. If you didn't hold the food, but at least it was present in front of you, so then you don't have to make another bracha. If the food was not in front of you, even though you had in mind and you knew you were going to eat it, the bracha is not valid, and you have to make a new bracha when you finally get the food. They bring down a very weird case. Somebody writes a shaila. A guy had a dream, and in the middle of the dream, he made the bracha shahako. Middle of his dream, he made a bracha shahako, and then he woke up and he wanted to drink water. So the din is the bracha he made in his sleep is invalid. Why is it worthless? Number one, when you're sleeping, you're not obligated to mitzvahs. You don't know what you're doing. Secondly, the food wasn't in front of you. It was in your dream, but there was no water or whatever you guy wanted to make a bracha and wasn't there. So therefore, that would also be an invalid bracha. Now, what happens if somebody takes a food in their hand and they make a bracha, and then the food falls out of their hand? Okay? So obviously, if it's an apple, okay, you pick up the apple and you just eat by wipe it off a little bit and you eat it. What happens if it's something that if it falls out of your hand, it becomes despicable that you're not able to eat it? Or you're holding a glass of water or juice in your hand, you make a bracha, and then the glass falls out of your hand. It slips out of your hand, and then there's no thing anymore. So the din is like this, that if the juice or the water or the food was in front of, and more of it was in front of you, so then, and you also have in mind that you're going to eat or drink more than what you just held in your hand, so then you don't have to make a new bracha. But if you had only a cup of orange juice in your hand, and you made a shahako, and the glass falls out of your hand, and now the juice is all over the floor, and then you're going to go into the refrigerator to take another cup of juice, then you're going to have to make a new bracha. because what you made a bracha on is non-existent. And now it's a new thing that you didn't intend, it wasn't in front of you, so then you'd have to make a new bracha. Another very important practical din is you're not allowed to make a separation between the eating and between the bracha and the eating. You make a bracha, you're supposed to eat it right away. Now, really, you're not allowed to talk until you swallow the first bite, and that we'll get to. It's a very practical din that a lot of people are just unaware of. It means like this. If you made say, berry pioites, okay, you can eat an apple, and you make a bracha berry pioites, and then you start talking about who knows what, okay, you have to make a new bracha, because you made a hefsek, you separated between the bracha and the food that you're eating. What happens, give you an example, you want to eat a piece of bread, and you make a maitzi, and then you realize there's no salt on the table. So you tell somebody, please bring the salt. So you're not supposed to do that, because you're still talking between the bracha and the eating. But what you spoke is relevant to the eating. You want to dip the bread into the salt. So then, b'diavad, after the fact, you do not have to make a new bracha. But halacha says you should make sure before you make a bracha that the salt's on the table, everything that you need. Or if somebody wants to make a bracha on the food and then they realize they don't have a knife to cut it. So you tell somebody before they ate, they made a bracha and they say, bring the knife. Because it's pertaining to the eating, you don't have to make a new bracha. But if it's talking not pertaining to the food, to the eating, halachically the first bracha is no good and you have to make another bracha. But if somebody was silent, they just were quiet, they made a bracha and they didn't eat right away for whatever reason, but they didn't talk. So b'diavad, they don't have to make a new bracha, even if it's a long period of time. As long as you didn't talk between the bracha and the eating, you don't have to make a new bracha. If you spoke not pertaining to the eating, then you need to make a new bracha. Now, another din is a person is not allowed to talk. This is a din that, again, a lot of people are unaware of. When you make a bracha on something, okay, take an apple. You make a bracha, very pure eights on the apple, and you take a bite into the apple. You are not allowed to talk until you swallow the first bite. You're not allowed to talk until you swallow the whole first bite. If you talk, you don't have to repeat the bracha because the food's in your mouth already. But people have to be careful. Let's say, you bite, you're in a rush and whatever, and you take a little bite. Until you swallow the first bite, you're not allowed to talk. To the extent, I'll tell you, we don't paskin like this, but there are opinions that say that if you putting a sucking candy into your mouth, okay, so you make a bracha shahak on the candy, and then you put it into your mouth. Now, when are you swallowing the first bite? So some opinions say that you really have to, you're not supposed to talk until you finish sucking the candy. But we don't pass them like that. Once you tasted the candy that you're sucking in the candy and you taste and you swallow a little bit of the flavoring, in that case it's enough. But all other foods that you make a bracha, you're not allowed to talk until you swallow the first bite. Next.
Rabbi, what about gum?
Well, the same thing with gum. Once you swallow it, you have to make a bracha on gum because you're getting taste of the flavoring of the gum. If somebody chews on a piece of leather, they don't make a bracha because you're not getting any taste from it. But if somebody is chewing gum, you make a shahako. And again, you shouldn't talk until you taste a little bit of the flavor of the gum, and then you'd be allowed to talk. But otherwise, no, Now, this is very relevant to the women or men that cook. You're making soup, chicken soup, okay? And you want to know, does the chicken soup need salt in it or whatever? So many times, a woman will taste a little bit of the soup to see if it needs spicing or salt or whatever. So the din is like this. If you don't swallow it, you put it into your mouth and you spit it out, then but you taste it just on your lip. It's not on your lip, on your tongue. You taste the flavor. So then you don't have to make a bracha on it. If you're going to swallow it, then you make a bracha. So it says it's better to make sure you swallow it, a decent amount, and then you make a bracha on it, and then that's the proper way of doing it. But halachically, if you just take it to taste and you don't swallow it and you spit it out, so then halachically you don't make a bracha. Now, there's another very interesting shaila. What is the bracha on? In other words, is it the benefit of the throat? Is it the benefit of the stomach? Now, for instance, if somebody is fed with a feeding tube, straight into the stomach, okay? The food is going straight into the stomach. Do you have to make a bracha on this food? Now, you're not tasting it. It's not going down your throat. But it's a question that poskim really don't come up with a clear answer. Because the question is it benefit of the stomach you're getting? The person can get full from the food coming into a food pipe. So then you are getting benefit from it. So you would have to make a bracha. Other people say it's not the normal way of eating it. And so that's a whole issue. If somebody, God forbid, has it, they should ask a shaila. But another interesting shaila is like this. Not all medications are kosher. In fact, to tell you the truth, most of them probably aren't. Because they have non-kosher ingredients. Magnesium stearate is not a kosher ingredient, generally speaking. Other things could be. Now the question is like this. When a person takes medicine, do you make a bracha on the medicine? Do you make a bracha on the medicine? So halacha says like this. If it's bitter, it doesn't, you're taking liquid, it doesn't taste good. You do not make a bracha. If it tastes good, you're chewing it and it tastes good, then you make a bracha. Okay? What happens if it's like they say, it's not a bad taste, not a good taste? So there's a question that most people say you do make a bracha in that case anyway. But if it's bitter, you don't make a bracha. If you swallow, now let me explain another din. When this thing was mentioned earlier classes in reference to a different thing. The only time you make a bracha on water is if you're thirsty. If you're not thirsty, you do not make a bracha on water, which means, halachically, I'm not talking what chassidim do, halachically, if somebody is taking a medicine, they're not thirsty, but they need to swallow some pills. And they're drinking the water only because they need to swallow the pill. Halachically, you do not make a bracha on that water. If it would be juice, tea, coffee, soda, something else besides water, then you would make a bracha on that liquid because you're benefiting from it. Halachically, water is only a benefit to make a bracha if you are thirsty, and that's when you enjoy it. So if somebody, let's say, has something stuck in their throat and they're drinking water to try to wash it down, halachically, you do not make a bracha on that water. They say chassidim didn't want to do anything without a bracha, so they would make that they're thirsty and they would make a bracha. But halachically, if you're taking down medicine, then it doesn't have to have, then you don't make a bracha on the water. Or if something's stuck, you don't make a bracha on the water. Now the question is like this, while we're on the topic of medicine, is as follows. do medications have to be kosher? Do medications have to be kosher? So the truth is that if it tastes good and either it's liquid or chewables and powder, we'll see in a minute, then it has to be kosher because you're eating it the normal way of eating. Now, obviously, if the doctor says it's a heart condition and whatever, or something like that, there are opinions in halacha that are lenient by medication, even if it's not kosher and it's liquid or chewable, you do not have to make a bracha. And basically the consensus is if you really, really need to take it, even if it's not kosher, the doctor orders you to take it, there are opinions that are lenient that even if it's not kosher, you could take it. But if somebody has a chewable, okay, 1 second, I'll answer that question about the water. If somebody is able to get a one you swallow instead of the chewable or the liquid, they really should do that because that's not the normal way of eating it. Swallowing a pill is not the normal way of eating it. But powder in a liquid, you mix powder and medication of a powder into a liquid. If the powder is not kosher, there is a question if you could take it. If it's chewable liquid medication, it might have to be halachically. It might have to be kosher. And then many times people will take chewable vitamins, and vitamins they're taking not because the doctor ordered. Sometimes the doctor ordered you need to take iron and zinc or whatever it is. But somebody likes to take a multivitamin every day, so they want to just take a chewable vitamin. Halachically, that vitamin must be kosher. It has to be kosher because it's not really medication, and you're mamish eating it. So if it's liquid or chewable, you really would have to make a bracha. It has to be kosher because you're making a bracha on it. Now, what happens, coming back to brachas, if somebody is taking a medicine, okay, let's go. Let me just first answer this question. If you're drinking to meet your daily water requirements, if you're not thirsty, you don't make a bracha on it. Let's say take your medicine, water to swallow down a pill. Okay, so that's not a good idea. You don't make a bracha on it. Unless if you make a bracha when you're thirsty at one time and you have in mind it's going to be going on, but you have to drink every so often. But again, halachically, if you're drinking it just because you want to have water in your system, you're not thirsty, you don't make a bracha on it. What happens if somebody is taking medication that's not kosher? And they're allowed to. Let's say the doctor says, you have to take this medicine. The din is, you make a bracha on it. Even though halachically, you're not allowed to make a bracha on non-kosher food. Nevertheless, because Torah says you're allowed to do it, because it's medication, and the doctor said you need to take it, so therefore halachically you're allowed to take it. So the din is, then you do make a bracha on the medicine, even though it's not kosher. For instance, somebody that eats on Yom Kippur, well, really you're not allowed to eat, but in their case they have to eat, whether it's children, adults that are not well, and they have a heter to eat on Yom Kippur. The din is, you make a bracha on the food. If it's non-kosher food, you don't make a bracha on it. In fact, somebody called me today with a very sad or interesting question that somebody is not so careful in kosher and they'll eat, they won't eat pig, but they'll go to a treif restaurant and have salmon. Or they'll go to a non-kosher pizza store and eat a pizza. In their eyes, it's not really treif, it's salmon. But the bottom line is, if it's in a treif restaurant, you have to assume it's mamish treif. It's cooked, baked together, cooked together, everything's hot and it's mixed, and who else knows what's on it? And the same thing with the pizza. So halachically, If they're eating it, because they're not that religious, they still cannot make a bracha on it. Because it's not kosher food. What?
I didn't quite get it. If someone says, say, like vitamin C, and you swallow it, but it still has that kind of citrusy
Yeah, but if you're swallowing it, it's fine. It's only if you chew it. If it's a chewable vitamin C, number one, then it has to be kosher. And secondly, then you would have to make a bracha on it.
But if it's the kind you swallow,
then you don't.
Then you don't make a bracha on it, even if it tastes citrusy.
Well, you don't really taste it. It's not a taste that you'd have to make a bracha on.
Okay.
Rabbi Shusterman, what about supplements? Powdered supplements has to be kosher.
Powdered supplements, unless if the doctor ordered to take them, they really should be kosher.
Okay.
And they're not always kosher. So, it has to be checked out, so to speak. Okay, next. Okay, what have we said? Okay, next thing is like this. What happens if somebody, by mistake, put food into his or her mouth without a bracha? By mistake, they put food in the mouth and they didn't make a bracha. So if it's something that's not disgusting, if you spit it out, like you bit into a piece of apple, you didn't chew it yet. So you bit off a piece of apple and you didn't realize you didn't make a bracha. So you take it out of your mouth and you make a bracha, and then you put it back in. But you're not allowed to make a bracha with anything in your mouth. And this is another very important thing that many people are unaware of. When in Tehillim, there's a pasuk, Yimale pi tehilasecha. My mouth will be full of your praise. From that pasuk, the Gemara learns, and Shulchan Aruch brings it down, that when a person praises Hashem, meaning they're making a bracha, their mouth has to be full of the bracha. Nothing else is allowed to be in the mouth at the same time. So to give you an example of that din, before we go back to the other din, you're eating coffee and cake, okay? So you make a bracha on a piece of cake, and you still have the cake in your mouth. You didn't swallow it completely, and then you make a shahakol on the coffee. You're not allowed to do that, because then when you're making the shahakol, your mouth is not full of the bracha because you have cake in your mouth. So therefore, when a person makes a bracha, they need to make sure that they make a bracha, they swallow completely what they have in their mouth, and then they can move on to the next food and make another bracha. Now, in this case, when a person put it into the mouth and didn't make a bracha, so if it's something that is not becoming disgusting, then you spit it out and you make a bracha.
What if you're not sure? What if you're not sure that you made the bracha? There's a suffix.
If you're not sure you made a bracha, then you're not allowed to make a bracha because it's a rabbinic doubt, and you might be saying Hashem's name in vain.
So what do you make an after bracha? What do you do?
Yeah, if you eat enough, you definitely make an after bracha.
Rabbi?
It's very interesting then. What happens if somebody ate food, okay, and they didn't know it wasn't kosher? They thought it was kosher. It happens. You thought it was mamish kosher. And you made a bracha and then you're eating it. And then you realize it's not kosher. Packaging are mislabeled, whatever. We have that all the time. Okay? Then you find out there was a tray for meat in there, or it wasn't, it's not good. So then the din is, do you make an after bracha or not? Now, it's accidental what you did. You didn't know it was treif and you're eating it. If you know it's treif, you're not allowed to make a bracha on it. But the question over here is, if I didn't know it was treif, so the halacha is interesting. If it's something only rabbinically forbidden, you'd make an after bracha. If it's something biblically forbidden, you don't make an after bracha. Yes, Essie?
Yeah, but if I don't remember if I said after bracha or not.
If you don't remember if you said an after bracha, again, because brachas are only rabbinic, and there might be a doubt of saying Hashem's name in vain, which is biblically forbidden. It's one of the 10 commandments. So then you wouldn't make a bracha. The only time you would have to make a bracha, if you don't remember, if you washed and had bread and you became full. Because we'll learn when we get to benching, the only biblical bracha, according to all opinions, is benching, and only if you're full. Because the Torah says, you'll eat, you'll become full, and you'll make an after bracha. So the Torah says clearly, if you're full and it's bread, then you have to make an after bracha. The Chachamim came along, the rabbis came along and said that even if it's a kazayis, it's 1 ounce, even if you're not full, you have to bench. But then it's only a rabbinic benching. It's not a biblical benching because you're not full. Anytime there's a rabbinic bracha that you don't remember if you said it or not, you do not repeat it because you might come to a biblical sin of making a bracha in vain. And halachically, a rabbinic doubt is lenient. If somebody has to make a biblical bracha, like we said, benching, you wash and you ate and you're full, and then you don't remember if you bench, then halacha says you have to bench again.
But if I'm not full, do I have?
If you're not full, then you don't have to bench afterwards. If you don't remember if you bench.
Rabbi,
Even if I'm not full, I cannot. I should say, I should bench.
Only if you were full, then you're bench.
So if I don't feel full, I don't bench.
No, you bench unless no, I'm saying you're talking about if you don't remember if you benched, right?
No.
No, if you eat 1 ounce of food, bread, you have to bench.
No.
Here we're talking about a person forgot about benching.
Even
You
if
don't
I'm not,
remember if they benched or not.
I ate. No. This is different. I ate 1 ounce of bread, but I don't feel full.
It doesn't matter. You have to bench anyway. Rabbinic.
Yeah, bench. Okay. Thank you.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
if a person's making a bracha rishona, and then he starts to eat and he forgot if he made a bracha rishona, does
You
he
don't
have to
make
make
a
a
new
bracha?
bracha.
He doesn't have to make a bracha.
No.
But isn't it like stealing? I mean,
No, because it's a doubt whether you could say Hashem's name in vain. What somebody might want to do, to be machmir, they could take another food with the same bracha, make a bracha on the new food, and have in mind for the old food also. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's say you don't remember if I made a bracha on an apple. Okay, so what you do is you'll take a little piece of pear, because you didn't think about eating the pear, right? So you take a little piece of pear, you make a eights on the pear, and you have in mind that it's also going on the apple, in case you didn't make a bracha.
Okay.
But halachically, you don't have to make a new bracha if you're in doubt, because again, it's rabbinic. The brachas are rabbinic, and you might come, God forbid, to make a biblical sin of saying a bracha in vain. Okay. Okay. The next thing we're going to leave for next time. Let's go to Tanya.